Recording is on.
So in the last class, we had discussed about the Rydberg equation, and we had done few numericals from there. So in today's class, we will be doing the de Broglie's equation. De Broglie's equation. But before that, let us do this. Let us do a few other numericals from this segment, from Rydberg only. But this one you will have to tell me the approach. So let's take this. The wavelength for alpha line in hydrogen the wavelength for alpha line of hydrogen in Balmer series is 6500 angstrom. What is the wavelength of beta line in the Paschen series? What is the wavelength of beta line in Paschen series? So tell me how you are going to approach this sum. You have 2 minutes time to tell the answer or at least tell me how you are going to approach this sum. What should be the method by which you should be doing this sum? So did you get it? So what should be the approach? How should you approach this sum? So here it is said that the wavelength of alpha line in the Balmer series is given to you, 6500 angstrom. We have to find it out for the beta line. So let us first do this. For the Balmer line, let us do the calculation. For Balmer line, so it is told hydrogen. Hydrogen means it is Z is equal to 1. Okay. Then it is told alpha line. See, alpha line is told. So alpha line means the value of N1 and N2 is also given to us. Value of N1 and N2 is given. So N1 is 2 because it is Balmer series, and correspondingly because it is the alpha line of Balmer series, so that is the value of N2 is equal to 3, because alpha line we had learned it in the last class. That is the immediate first line. That is our alpha line. So N1 is 2 and N2 is basically 3. Then lambda is also given to you, 6500 angstrom. So lambda is given at 6500 angstrom. So what you do not know from here is basically the value of R. R is not given. Rydberg constant, because see, other than that everything is given. So R is not given. So now let us simply apply the formula and find out the value of R. R is a constant only, but because over here every other variable's value are known to us, only the R is unknown. That is why we'll be finding out that value of constant using the formula. So the formula was 1 by lambda. So 1 by 6500 equal to Rz square. So R z square is 1 square, so which you already know. So no need to do, 1 square is same, into 1 by n1 square, so 2 square minus 1 by n2, that is 3 square. So find out the value of R from here. So thus R is going to be, R is equal to 1 by 6500 into 36, 4 and 9, that is 36, and into 36 divided by 4, 9 minus 4, that is equal to 5. So 36 by 5. So this is your thing. This is the value of Rydberg constant. Now see for Balmer line what is happening. So we have not done the calculation here. We will do it later. Okay? So the calculation will be done later. In the final step, we'll do the calculation. So now see what happens for the Balmer line. We have calculated. Now it is given for the Paschen line. We have to find out. For Paschen line means the value of N1 is 3. And it is said beta line. It is said beta line. See, beta line. So beta line means it is the second line. So the value of N2 is 5. Value of N2 is 5. We are done about this alpha beta concept in the previous class. The alpha beta concept was done in previous class only. So we applying that. So N1 is 3, N2 is basically 5. Okay. And lambda, that is only what you need to find out. Lambda you do not. R value we have just found out. We will now put down that value and find out the value of alpha, lambda, and we get our answer. So 1 by lambda is equal to R. R is 36 by 6500 into 5 into 1 by 3 square minus 1 by 5 square. 1 by 3 square minus 1 by 5 square. So that is equal to, now we simply do down all this, put the values and do it. So that is basically 36 by 6500 into 5 into this is 9 and 25, that is the LCM will be 225, and 9 means 25 minus 9, that is equal to 16. So 16 by 25. So this is your total value. From here find out the lambda. So lambda will be just the inverse of this value. So 6500 into 5 into 125 divided by 36 into 60. So this you have to calculate in order to get to your answer. And if you put this and do the calculation, then your answer should come at 12695. 12695 angstrom. 12695 angstrom. So thus you are getting your answer to be as lambda is equal to 12695 angstrom.
Sir,
Okay. Yes, sir.
N2 how 5 or N2 is 3, I have doubt in that N2.
Say once again.
I have doubt in N2.
N2,
N,
this one.
yes.
Okay, because see in the question it is saying is a beta line in Paschen series. So because it is Paschen series, that is why the value of, refer to the table, in Paschen series the value of n1 is what? 3. So that is why we are writing the value of n1 to be 3. And how are you getting n2? For that is alpha beta lines. So the alpha line is always the first line, but the immediate next line. That is 4 to 3. That is the alpha line. Beta line is the second line. So 5 to 3. So that is the, for Paschen series only, beta line will be from 5 to 3. For any series, alpha line is always the immediate first line. That is from the immediate next energy level. And beta line is the next, the second one. Then gamma is the third line. So like this way it goes. So because it is Paschen, so value of n1 is 3. Thus the value of n2 will be the second one. That is not 4 but 5. Is this transition. This is the beta, 5 to 3. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
And similarly, see in this one, it was said the Balmer series alpha line. So Balmer means the value of n1 is 2. Balmer means n1 is equal to 2. And now it is seeing the alpha line. So that means the immediate next energy level. So that is why 3. So is the sum clear to everyone? So here you have to first, by the first line of information, you have to put down the value and find out the value of Rydberg from there. And once you get that, then apply that Rydberg value in the second line of the question and find out the value of wave. Okay? Is it clear to everyone? Please let me know.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What about the others? Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Hmm. So then let us see the next one. So the next sum will be this. What optical transition in the spectrum in the spectrum of helium plus. Will have the same wavelength. Will have the same wavelength as the fast Lyman transition of hydrogen. Okay, so this is the question. So again, you get a time to think for about 1 minute to tell me how you approach the sum. I do not want the solution. You just tell me the method of how you can do this sum. Let us just try. So you have 1 minute time to think and tell me the method of approaching this sum. Okay, so do you get the approach of how you do the sum? Did you get to see the approach of how you can go on with the sum? Go on, sir.
So we can put the energy formula.
Okay, energy then. Then what can you do?
So by
Energy won't help though. Putting the value of energy, it won't help over here. What you can do is you have to here actually find out that 1 by lambda value. In both the cases, you have to find out that 1 by lambda value and then simply equate them. That's it. So you find out the 1 by lambda for both the
yes,
cases and equate them. Because it is set the same wavelength. So if lambda is same, then obviously 1 by lambda is also having the same value.
same.
If lambda has the same value, then 1 by lambda 2 has the exact same value. So that only will be doing. So it is said, right, we have the same wavelength as the first transition of hydrogen. So for hydrogen, it is said Lyman transition. See, so Lyman mane N1 is 1. N2 will be, it is said fast transition. So N2 is basically 2, 2 to 1. And Z is also 1 because it is hydrogen. So what do you get as 1 by lambda? 1 by lambda is equal to r.
Sir, if this
Say,
beta is not there,
yes,
N2 is equal to 2.
yes, say once again.
In this question, gamma beta is not there. Then how N2 is equal to 2? How we can understand?
AJ, by this one, first line, first, the first word is given, no? The first Lyman transition. So this alpha, beta, gamma, that is also the first, second, and third only. Alpha, mane, the first line. So this is the first line. Because alpha, as you
Yes,
know,
sir. Yes.
okay, if you go via the Greek alphabet, then alpha is only the first alphabet in Greek. So that is why, because if something is alpha, that means that's the first one. Then you have the second, and this is the third. Like this way it goes on. So we do not put the value of r in this case, because see, it is, we have to equate them. So that means they will easily cancel out. So no need to put down that big value. We simply keep it as r. Okay. R into z square, which in this case is 1 square. So we are not writing it, but let's write it for this sum, into 1 by n1 square, that is 1 square, minus 1 by n2 square, that is 2 square. So that is equal to r into 1 minus 1 by 4, that is equal to 3 by 4. So 3r by 4. Okay. Then you have to do it for helium, He plus. For He plus, the value of n1 you do not know. That is only you need to find out. For n1 and n2 is what you need to find out. So these two things you have no idea in this particular case. But you know that it is said He plus. He plus is good. So that means the value of z is equal to 2. So z will be 2 in this case. So now you write down the Rydberg equation. So 1 by lambda is equal to r into z square and 2 square into 1 by n1 square minus 1 by n2 square. So that is equal to 4r into 1 by n1 square minus 1 by n2 square. Okay. So that's it. We have got these two equations. And now, acha, however, we know the value of n. We know the value of n. Yes. How do you know the value of n2? Because as you can see, it is told optical transition. Optical transition. And optical transition means, we had already told this in some class, AJ.
Bahamas.
Optical is the Balmer series, because that is only visible. So that means the Balmer series is told. So what optical transition is told, that means one of the value you know, that is 2. This you know. N1 is equal to 2. So thus you are getting 2n whole square, that is equal to 1 by 4 minus 1 by n2 square. Now it is told that they have the same wavelength. Will have the same wavelength. Mane lambda, both the lambdas are same. So let us put it as lambda 1 and lambda 2. So both the values of lambda are same. So if lambda 1 is equal to lambda 2, then obviously 1 by lambda is equal to 1 by lambda 2. So that is why we simply equate these two equations and find out the value of n2 from there. So according to question, lambda 1 is equal to lambda 2. Therefore, 1 by lambda 1 is equal to 1 by lambda 2. So this is 3r by 4. 3r by 4, that is equal to 1 by lambda 2 is basically 4r into 1 by 4 minus 1 by n2 whole square. See, r and r is cancelling out. That is why I told you not to put down the values of r in this particular sum. So you are getting this 4 will come on the left hand side. So 3 by 16 is equal to 1 by 4 minus 1 by n2 square. So from here find out the value of n2. So 1 by n2 whole square is equal to 1 by 4 minus 3 by 16. So 16 is the LCM. 4 minus 3, 1 by 16. Now you can easily find out the value of n2 in this case. So 1 by n2 square is equal to 1 by 16. So now you just make it square root. 1 by n2, that is equal to root over of 1 by 16. So that is equal to 1 by 4. So from here you get that n2 is basically equal to 4. So therefore, what is the transition? So the transition is 2 to 4. 2 to 4. This is the correct answer. Because in the question that asked you about the transition, they had asked you what optical transition. So if you tell your answer at 4, that is an incomplete answer. You have to tell us about the transition. So the transition is from 2 to 4. So thus, what did we do in this sum? In this particular sum, we have simply expressed the lambdas, that is the wavelength for the hydrogen and the helium spectrum. And then, because it was told as a condition of the sum that the two values are basically same, hence we are getting to see, we are just equating them and calculating out the value of n2. Okay, so clear to everyone? Please let me know.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's it. So the thing is, these are the types that you can expect. So 95% of the questions that you are having, that should be coming from your this one only, from the types that you have discussed. Now obviously there can be exceptions, but most of them should be coming from here. So yeah, so then that's it. Now let us move on then to the next topic and see them. So the next topic will be the de Broglie's equation. So de Broglie's equation. De Broglie's equation. But before we move on to the de Broglie's equation, we should discuss about the drawbacks of Bohr's theory, because the drawbacks is actually causing us the de Broglie's equation. So de Broglie's equation, before that we'll be doing the drawbacks of Bohr's theory. This is a theory part, drawbacks of Bohr's theory. So the first drawback is Bohr's theory does not explain the reason behind the quantization of angular momentum. So it does not explain the reason behind the quantization of angular momentum. As you can see, as you had seen in the Bohr's theory that you had written the statement, there it had said is the Bohr's theory of quantization. Bohr's theory had said that mvr is equal to nh by 2 pi. So that means he is fixing the possible values of angular momentum. What values can exist and whom cannot. That was being fixed by Bohr. But Bohr, in his entire theory, did not give a reason of why he is taking this as a condition. So the reason behind this condition that was not given by Bohr. He simply said that this is going to be the conditions that you have to assume. This is a condition that has to be followed. But why we are having this condition, no such explanation regarding it was given by Bohr's theory. So that's one. Then secondly, Bohr's theory, the most important one. Bohr's theory is only applicable for one electron system. For one electron system. So what did actually Bohr do? Bohr, when he did his calculation, all the calculations done by Bohr was based on hydrogen. Bohr had done all the calculations based on hydrogen. And for Bohr, all the values matched with the experimental value. Bohr had done the calculation for hydrogen, and it was observed that his mathematically calculated value matched with the experimentally observed value. So thus, it was thought that his theory must be correct. But later, when other scientists went on to calculate the data for other elements, it was seen that they do not follow the Bohr's theory. So after Bohr proved his experiment, after Bohr published his paper, and other scientists also went to calculate the values for other atoms, but it was seen that that didn't happen. It did not happen. They did not match. For helium, for lithium, the values did not match. The value that was calculated mathematically using Bohr's theory, that did not match with the experimentally observed value. So it was seen on further investigation that Bohr's theory is only applicable to one electron system. That means where only one electron is present, only in such cases Bohr's theory will be applicable. So that means it is applicable for hydrogen, helium plus, lithium 2 plus. Like this way it is applicable. Why helium plus it is applicable? Because helium normally has 2 electrons. So if you remove 1 electron from helium, that's 1 electron will be left behind. Hence Bohr's theory is applicable for helium plus. Why is it applicable for lithium 2 plus? Because lithium generally has 3 electrons. So if you remove 2 electrons from lithium, you are getting lithium 2 plus. And it has 1 electron only. If you are removing out of the 3, if you remove 2 electrons, then it has 1 electron. So that's it. So Bohr's theory is only applicable for one electron system. Okay. Then the number 3. So this is a very important point. Bohr's theory is only applicable for one electron system. And that is why if you observe in the previous sum, I had written the atom to be as helium plus. I had not considered it to be as helium. Rather, we had done the sum taking helium plus. Because for helium, these things will change a bit. So we are doing it with helium plus. because helium plus is a one electron system and Bohr's theory is applicable only for one electron. That is fine. Then Bohr's theory does not explain. Bohr's theory does not explain does not explain the hyperfine splitting of spectral lines. Of spectral lines under certain conditions. One is higher resolution. Number two is in presence of magnetic field. That is the Zeeman effect. And number three is in presence of electric field. Which is known as the Stark effect. Okay. So, see, we had already known from our various these things. From the basic point, we had already known that spectral lines undergo splitting. So, we had already seen that spectral lines undergo splitting. But now we are getting to see that there are even more splitting inside the spectral line. So we have seen from Planck's theory that the spectral lines are discontinuous. They are not at all continuous. But even under that, we are seeing that even further more small splittings are present in the spectral line. And when are they observed? When you observe them under higher resolution. So now what does this statement mean? Under higher resolution? For this, you think it in this way. Suppose these are the lines that are present. So these are the spectral lines. These are the different spectral lines that you have. So suppose these are some of the spectral lines. Okay. Now when you observe them under, so as you can see that all the lines are separate from one another, correct? So all the lines that you have drawn, all the lines are separate from one another. Okay. But if we zoom in, then you get to see it is appearing like a single band. It is appearing like all the lines are, it's a single line. It appears to be as a single line, although there's a big gap which is just breaking away the entire thing. So let me just put it over here. Okay. So now when you see this line, it appears to be as a single line. See, it is appearing to be as a single line. So Bohr actually observed this to be a single line. Okay. But then as more and more technology progressed, what happened? If you remember the previous days phone camera, it was hardly 5 megapixel, 10 megapixel camera. But now in today's phone, even at a very low priced phone, we get 16 megapixel, 32 megapixels of camera. So that means as more and more technology progressed, we got better cameras. So here also, as more and more technology progressed, we got a better spectrometer. By better camera, I mean the clarity of the camera increased, and here also the clarity of the spectrometer increased. So this was what Bohr observed under the current experimental condition at his time. But then as the technology went on improving, what happened? The camera that we got or the spectrometer that we got, they got improving, and thus that image become more and more magnified. It became more and more magnified and more sharp. And then we are actually getting to see that in fact the lines are separate from one another. What was appearing to be as a single band during Bohr because of the low resolution of camera, now at a higher resolution camera, we are getting to see that no, it is basically, this band is basically made up of a collection of many separate lines. So obviously Bohr could not observe this line due to the technical reasons of his time, and as a result his theory does not explain anything about this hyperfine splitting. So this is only the hyperfine splitting which are observing at a higher resolution. Other than that, this hyperfine splitting can also be observed when we apply an electric field or a magnetic field. So when we apply electric field, that is known as Zeeman effect, sorry, Stark effect, and when you apply a magnetic field, that is known as the Zeeman effect. Now Zeeman and Stark effect will not be written in our portion because these are pretty much advanced, taught in MSc, but you just need to know the names. The splitting of spectral lines in magnetic field is known as Zeeman effect, whereas splitting of the spectral lines in electric field, that is known as the Stark effect. Then what other drawbacks does Bohr has? Now the next drawback of Bohr will be that is Bohr's theory violated the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Bohr's theory violated Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So the Bohr's theory did not follow the Heisenberg's principle. Now what is this Heisenberg principle? That will be seen in the upcoming classes. In the next class only, we'll be learning about this Heisenberg's principle. And number 5, that is Bohr's theory, that is it considered the atomic structure to be two-dimensional. See, remember the structures of atom that you have drawn, all of them were two-dimensional structures. But in reality, the structure of an atom is a three-dimensional. So it considers the atoms, the atomic structure, to be two-dimensional. However, in reality, atoms are three-dimensional. So the structure of an atom is actually a three-dimensional thing and not a two-dimensional model that was given by Bohr. Okay. So is it clear to everyone? Please let me know.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so these are the Bohr's theory's drawback. This is often asked sometime as a theory question, so please prepare them. And yes, so that's about our Bohr's theory. So then, in the next classes, we'll be learning about two theories. In the next class only, we'll be doing the two theories, which is the de Broglie's theory and Heisenberg's theory. So from now onwards, it will be a totally new model. We are done with both. Now we'll be gradually doing the new model things. So we'll be doing the de Broglie and Heisenberg. Although these things are new, but they are very easy. It is new, but it is very easy. Like you can easily understand the de Broglie now only, although we'll do it in details in the next class. What did de Broglie do? The formula for de Broglie's equation is very simple. That is, you know the Einstein's formula, E equal to mc square. E is equal to mc square. This is the Einstein's equation. And you also have the Planck's equations, E equal to h nu. So in both the cases, you have energy. See, here is also energy, and here is also you have energy. So de Broglie just equated these two things. So he got mc square is equal to h nu. Now what can we replace nu with? Nu can be written as hc by lambda. Hc by lambda. C by lambda is equal to nu that we had seen in the previous wave part that we did. Now from here, make lambda as the subject of equation. So lambda is known as hc by mc square. Now the c and c will cancel out. So all you are remaining with h by mc. Okay, and from here you can finally write the equation to be as lambda is equal to h by mv. Why mv? Because all objects are not moving with the speed of light, so they can move with any velocity. So that is why mv. So that means we can call that lambda is equal to Planck's constant by the momentum. By momentum. So what does this equation actually prove? So we have done the de Broglie also. So what does this equation prove? Let's see. Under Planck's theory, we got to know that light has particle nature. Under the Planck's theory, we are getting to see that light has a particle nature. By the way, this is called the de Broglie wavelength. This lambda is known as the de Broglie wavelength. And this equation is ultimately known as the de Broglie equation. Okay, so now this de Broglie equation is actually saying that both the particle nature and wave nature simultaneously exist in an object. So an object, any object, can behave both as a particle and as a wave. So every object has the dual nature. So that is why this is also known as the wave particle duality. Wave particle duality. So every particle, every object has both the qualities inside it simultaneously, and both of them are coexisting together. That means it can behave like a particle also, as well as it can behave like a wave. So both of them can happen simultaneously. So now the question is that if then this is true, then why do we see the everyday objects around us to be as particle? We do not see everyday objects around us moving like a wave. We do not see a car moving in a wave-like motion. Rather, we see them moving in a straight path. We do not see the wave motion of a car or a truck or any object that we see around us. Everything that we are seeing around us is behaving like a particle only. But the de Broglie's theory says that everything has both the nature, that is, the particle nature as well as the wave nature. So it is seen on calculation, that is, if you simply put down the values in this equation, then you will get to see for macroscopic object, that means for the big object, something which can be seen without microscope. That is for large objects, macroscopic object. This wavelength is so small, this de Broglie wavelength is so small that it is becoming negligible. Because macroscopic object has a huge mass, as a result, the de Broglie wavelength is so small that it is negligible. It cannot even be measured. It has a value, mathematically it has a value, but physically it does not have any significance. See, just like mathematics says that two parallel lines will always meet at infinity. Two parallel lines is always meeting at infinity. So mathematically, yes, mathematically it's true that parallel lines do meet. And where do they meet? They will meet at infinity. But in real world, we know that it is actually not measurable. Infinity too is not something that we can measure. So that is why in real world we say that in parallel lines never meet each other. But mathematics gives the answer to that. Mathematics says that they will be meeting at infinite distance. So here also it says by mathematics we can say that every object has both particle as well as wavelength. But for macroscopic objects, the value of the wavelength, every wave is associated with a wavelength. Each and every wave must have a wavelength. So it is seen that for particles, this wavelength is so small that it is negligible. It cannot be measured only. So that's why for macroscopic objects, that means the everyday objects that we see around us, for them, the de Broglie's equation is not significant. It doesn't hold true. It doesn't cause any serious changes for everyday objects around us. But when the objects become very small, that is microscopic objects, subatomic particles like electron, protons, all these things, then their mass decreases, then this value of mass is decreasing. Like for electron, the mass is 9.1 into 10 to the power of minus 31. So the mass decreases hugely. Because the mass decreases, the value of lambda will also become very, very prominent, because lambda is inversely proportional to mass. So smaller the mass, higher the wavelength. So for subatomic particles, because the mass is small, then the lambda has a significant value. It has a pretty significant value. It can be a measured. It is going to have a measurable quantity. As a result of that, you cannot ignore that, like we had done for macroscopic objects. Hence, we'll be seeing that subatomic particles can simultaneously exist both as a particle as well as a wave. So subatomic particles, because they have a very low mass, they can exist both as a particle as well as a wave simultaneously. And that is why we call that wave particle duality is observed in subatomic particles. That means electrons are behaving both as a particle as well as a wave. So electron is both a particle and a wave, and both of them are happening at the same time. So that's about our de Broglie's equation. And for real life situation also, wave nature is there, but it is so small that it cannot be actually calculated. So it doesn't hold any significance. But for subatomic particles, it is very significant. So subatomic particles like electrons and protons are both a wave as well as a particle existing simultaneously. So this is the basic idea behind the de Broglie's equation. Okay, is it clear to everyone? So this is the wave particle duality, where both wave and particle characteristic are existing at the same time. Okay, is it clear? Please let me know. We will discuss more about de Broglie's and Heisenberg in the upcoming classes. Okay, so then that's it. I am disconnecting the call then. Bye everyone.